All right, good afternoon. So, before we jump into this video, I'm going to be live this evening at 7 p.m. UK time. I'm going to be on with a friend of mine who's an investment manager, and we're going to be talking about what's gone on this week and what continues to, I guess, be an escalation in this tariff war. Um, and we're going to hopefully give you some tips, things to think about that will help you navigate what's going on right now as smartly as possible. But in this video, what I want to do is just talk a little bit about the fact that this afternoon, China is ramping up the tariff war and imposing 125% tariffs on US goods. As a result of that, Trump has also increased the tariffs on Chinese goods going into America to 145%. The question is, in this madness, who is going to blink first? I want to talk a little bit about what's going on in the markets, what companies in the S&P 500 are the ones who are going to be most impacted by this, because companies are going to be impacted by this. And later on this evening, we'll be able to dive into what that looks like from just an investment strategy point of view when I get Jax on the channel at 7 p.m. But first and foremost, let's have a little look at the news as it came out that China was increasing its tariffs on the United States to 125%.
We just got news a few minutes ago that China is retaliating again against the US retaliation. So it's hard to tell who's retaliating in what way at this point. But China's now saying they're at 125%, and Donald Trump saying that US tariffs are on China at 145%. So we're in the realm of just endless tit for tat, it seems, at this point. But the message very much from China is we are going to escalate if you're going to escalate. Whether that creates the room that Donald Trump is talking about for conversation at some point, it probably still does, because Xi Jinping and Donald Trump are both pragmatic enough to know that they probably should talk to each other if there is that opportunity. But how do you get agreement and understandings to talk in a climate like this? But certainly China sending the message again that they're not going to start to slow down in the face of Donald Trump's escalations on trade.
Yeah, and Christian, I guess this is, what everyone was waiting for. Does China kind of stand still and try to negotiate, or do they ratchet it up? Is this just going to escalate, or will there be common minds at some point?
Yeah, I think the uncomfortable thing for markets right now is this escalate to de-escalate idea. I mean, you've seen that to some extent with the reciprocal tariffs and the 90-day pause. Like, you had an escalation, and eventually there was a pivot. And the market has the same to some extent with the US and China. Where does it get worse enough? And the market never likes things it can extrapolate, and it never likes things that cause uncertainty. So the more you escalate, the more you cause uncertainty. So I think in summary, as of now, it seems like negotiations, escalations, and the market will price this increased uncertainty until you have to pivot.
Who blinks first, Ross,
Yeah.
I guess is a question, right? And is this just geopolitics, or is this about the economy? Yesterday, we also know that China really took quite a lot of time to try and figure out whether they could support the economy to a point where they felt comfortable, with an escalation.
Well, Xi Jinping probably feels fairly comfortable. I mean, they've done quite a lot of work in China to diversify their economy away from the US. You can see that in the way that the trade has risen with other places and the kinds of goods that they're shipping to the US versus what they're importing from the US. So they can possibly weather it a bit better in terms of the direct impact on consumers. For the US, it's much more direct hit on consumers. Xi Jinping is also doing a lot to try and boost consumption in China. We're expecting more from that, possibly even today, more announcements on stimulus from China designed to juice their own economy. But equally, they do have their own bases to think about here. Xi Jinping needs to look strong for his domestic base. Donald Trump needs to look strong that he's standing up to his own voters. So when you've got two leaders who both need to play to their bases, both need to look strong, how do you thread the needle through that to get to the point that you can talk to each other without looking like you blinked first? And so that.
And I think really this is going to be the difficulty in this whole situation. Who is going to blink first? It's really amazing if you were paying attention to, obviously, the markets of the past couple of days. We're going to look at a heat map of the markets in a moment. But when it was announced yesterday or the day before yesterday that there was going to be a pause on the tariffs for 90 days, supposedly for countries who had been in contact with the White House to negotiate, we saw the markets kind of rally. And that was to be expected because it is really good news that hopefully there's going to be some open dialogue. And I think the bigger issue with the markets right now, let's actually have a look at the heat map as we currently have this open right now. The heat map for the S&P 500 currently looks like this. So it's up a little bit like that. Let me just refresh this actually, just to make sure this is completely up to date. So it's still up a little bit right now, right? But if you looked at this yesterday and earlier today, this was still red. And whenever you see red on a heat map, it's not necessarily a good thing because that means that obviously the value of these companies are dropping quite significantly. And the question is going to be not just about who blinks first, but ultimately, what is going to be the impact for the companies who are participating and are reliant on China for manufacturing? And we'll talk about that a little bit later on. But I can't help but get past, and I'd love to hear your views when you obviously watching this in the comment section around how you feel this is being handled right now. Because it feels as though we've had someone go and go on with this idea that they want to restructure the way global trade has been happening for the past 20, 30, 40 years. And yes, China has been protectionist on its own, has not necessarily played to the rules of the WTO either. They're a law unto their own. And even when I was in an investment house and a discretionary fund manager, whenever we invested in China, we always knew that to a certain extent, some of the data you would get from China could be a little bit unreliable and they could make things up because of the way they work. But when you have Donald Trump taking this ball in a China shop approach to this, many people are questioning whether it's the right thing. I mean, I don't think it's the right thing personally. Let me know whether you think this is the right direction, because I think ultimately, yes, shifting global trade is a huge, huge thing to do and a very, very difficult thing to do. But could this have been done in a better way where there wouldn't have been so much of an impact on the global market so far? Now, when I made the video this week, someone amply pointed out that actually the value wiped off these companies was $6 trillion. I don't know where they are now because we've had another 2-3 days of volatility. One day where the markets were up quite significantly, 7%, the S&P 500. But we've had huge value wiped off a lot of these companies in the S&P 500. Now, I did a little bit of a search a bit earlier on, right? So we've got Apple here. And Apple's going to be a really, really interesting one because when you think about who's reliant on China for manufacturing, there are two main companies that kind of stand out. We've got Apple and we've got Tesla. These are the two that really kind of like stand out to me. Now, Tesla's just gone red there. Okay. Apple's still up 0.035% at the moment. But let's take a deeper look at Apple specifically. All right. So let me just share this screen with you. Now, this is a look at the Apple stock over the past 6 months. Now, where's the peak? The peak is up here at $259 a share. Look at this right here. So this happened on, does it give me the date here? It doesn't give me the actual date, but see that drop. So it went from $223 down to what we are right now at $191. That is a huge parabolic drop. And if tariffs continue to escalate in the way that they are right now, so Xi Jinping doesn't blink first or Trump doesn't blink first, and there isn't a way to have open dialogue around how do we come to some kind of common ground where America feels like they're getting a good deal and China feel as though they're getting a good deal, this becomes wholly unsustainable. Because what this looks like is a huge impact on the Apple stock price moving forward, a massive restructuring for Apple internally because they're going to have to seriously think about their manufacturing. And look, shifting manufacturing for Apple from China is going to be a huge logistical issue because it's not just about the manufacturing units, but it's also what they're actually producing in China. If you think about all of their product lines, the AirPods, the iMacs, the MacBook Pros, you think about all of those products that are physically being manufactured and assembled in places like China, they will have to pay currently 145% import that tariff for goods going into the US. So that means that the price of an iPhone might jump quite considerably. Well, we'll have to jump quite considerably unless Tim Cook decides that Apple eats part of that, which I don't think is going to be the case because they have shareholders and they have to deliver value to their shareholders. Now, the only thing that might happen is we might see that Apple and maybe Tesla get a bit of a concession or special treatment when it comes to an exemption for these tariffs. What that looks like, I don't really know, but I'm absolutely certain that right now, if you're a fly on the wall, Apple HQ discussing these tariffs, that there is going to be huge pressure on Donald Trump to find a solution. We already know that Elon has kind of lambasted this whole thing, saying that really we need zero trade in terms of 0% trade, free trade, to be able to lubricate commerce and business. Unfortunately, Donald Trump doesn't see it that way. Now, my concern is that obviously whenever you have these types of things go on, if you're young enough, we've already discussed this earlier this week, these are opportunities. You can invest, buy these stocks now, get invested, hold it for the long term. They should go up once everything returns to normal. But if you are of the older ages, then this really has a big impact on your pensions, particularly if you're looking to take an income. Even if you're in your 20s and 30s right now, it's going to impact your workplace pension. But the point is, you still have 20 odd, 30 odd, 40 odd years maybe before you actually need to access your cash for pension reasons at all. But if you're in those latter years, this right now is horrible. And not to mention, small businesses are being wiped out as a result of all of this. Imagine a drop shipping business importing goods from China. An 145% tariff, your company disappears overnight. Your livelihood disappears overnight. There will be Americans right now who are losing businesses, losing their homes, losing their livelihood because of this. And I think it's a very, very high price to pay for an outcome that we're not completely certain about. And the language is really concerning to me. In Donald Trump's tweet about the fact that he was increasing the tariffs to 145%. His opening line was something along the lines because of China's disrespect for global markets. It's like, who started this thing? Who started this thing? You started it. So really, if you were to break this down into very simple terms, and there's a fight in a schoolyard, who should end the fight? The person who started it, or the person who's getting punched in the face, or was, provoked? You tell me. I have no idea. I don't know how this is going to pan out. We've had one day of positivity because, yes, it's being paused for 90 days for the countries who want to apparently negotiate. But I think the bigger issue is going to be the story between the US and China. And I was going to say the EU as well, but it feels like the EU is taking a pause at the moment to see what's going on, because they were going to retaliate with 25% tariffs. I don't know whether they actually implemented that or not, whether they've actually stepped back a little bit. But US and China is the big one. Who is going to blink first? Because they're both very, very proud men. They're both world leaders. They both need to appear strong, each to the Americans and each to the Chinese. So how do they create an off-ramp? And unfortunately, the off-ramp cannot be created by China. Trump has to build this off-ramp. So what is that off-ramp going to look like? What is that softening going to look like? There are videos of J.D. Vance calling the Chinese people peasants who manufacture our goods. I mean, that type of language is not going to help the situation at all. I'd love to know what you think in the comment section down below, because this has the potential to be quite a protracted, I would say, economic conflict. And all the while this is happening, the markets are going to be volatile. So again, make sure that you're prepared and you're ready. Join us at 7 p.m. UK time. I'll be talking with Jax, and hopefully we'll be able to give you a few tips there and be able to get some insights around what the professionals are thinking, how they're constructing portfolios right now, and hopefully you can take some of that into your own journey as well. I'll see you at 7 p.m. Leave a comment down below, smash the like button. If you have not already subscribed, I'd appreciate a subscribe as well. Catch you at 7 p.m. Cheers.